are talking about how do you make decisions in the future, and what's going on. So I wanted to start with a bit of a commentary about the crazy that exists today, because many of you know I have been jumping up and down and talking about this idea of future and how you need to think about how to talk about the future you for a very long time. And then this really weird thing started to happen. We had a pandemic, and now we are in the middle of a cultural revolution. And it, I don't know about you, feels like the rule books of life, other than the really basic ones of don't be a jerk. God, even the don't do illegal things, I think is, the line has gotten a little blurry there. But the rules of life, the book has been kind of torn up, set afire, and chucked out the window, which for all of us is a little terrifying and a bit scary and a bit complicated, because we are, as human beings, well, we do like, as human beings, to understand what is going to happen in the future. And we like to have some stability and some clarity about what it is we're going to do. And I don't think anybody these days is super clear about what is going to happen in the future. And so I want to start out with this conversation that a lot of what I'm talking about today is saying, look, this is actually an opportunity, because there is no rule book, to start making up your own rules. We did a show a couple of weeks ago actually about how do you define your own rules. But now I want to say, okay, how do you start navigating this ambiguous future? Specifically when it comes down to your career. Now, I'm going to put a big caveat on this, is all of the things I'm going to talk about today not only work within your professional state, but also in your personal as well. You can use everything that we're going to talk about to actually think about, like, who ultimately do you want the future you to be? So with that, so if the rules of life have changed within the world of careers, I think the rules have changed really dramatically, and specifically around the promises, or I actually think they're myths, that we have all been taught about how we should navigate our professional future. So the first promise or idea that I think is time to retire is this idea that there's a very clear path and map that somebody else will be able to define for you in your future. Nobody knows the rules anymore. Nobody knows quite what's going to happen. Everybody is making up the rules. And if you're working right now, every single company I've been talking to, or people who are working in companies, are like, oh, we're just making new stuff up every day. So the whole idea of this concept of the career path, and that when you get a job, somebody is going to be able to say, look, if you do this, then this next thing happens, and then this next thing happens, and then this next thing happens. And if you follow all of these rules and guidelines, is so untrue now that I think it's time to let this one go. Now, anybody who has been in their career for a while will be like, well, I already know this idea, because when I started out on my career path, I was thinking one thing, and by 6 or 7 jobs later, I was doing something totally different. I would also suggest that on a very personal level, if you take agency over your own future, you actually get to define it yourself. Now, can you have guides along the way? Yes, and we're going to talk about them. But so get rid of the idea that there is a defined career path, which I know is a little bit scary, and you're like, wait a second, what? But it'll work for you. The second thing is actually the promise of employment. There is, unfortunately, and it was a promise, I think, back in like the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, that if you went to go work for a company, they would take care of you permanently. There were retirement plans. There were all sorts of good things that were built into infrastructure. Now, it came from a place where the original wave of the Industrial Revolution were absolutely horrifying to people. And if you haven't watched the series The Mill, I highly recommend taking a look at that, because you can see what it was like to actually be a worker in the 18th century, well, not 18th, 19th century, early 20th century. It was a pretty miserable situation for a lot of people. But there was a lot of rules made from that era where a lot of people died, and it was not good at all, around what were companies' responsibilities. Now, am I saying that companies don't care about you? Absolutely not. I think they do. But I think we've all seen that, you know, if your business has to shut down, your business has to shut down. So this whole idea of, if you get a job, there's a promise to you. There's a promise to you while you continue to add value, and while there is still money to pay you. And I think that transaction needs to be looked at very carefully on an individual basis, because as you all know, and especially for those of you that live and work in California, it's generally at-will employment, and people could be let go tomorrow. Yeah, again, bad news, but how do you take agency over that? The obvious next one about what has changed in the rule book is the whole concept of office is going to be different in this future. So all of the things that we were taught about making sure that you get to be in meetings, making sure that you were there before the boss or staying later than the boss, the whole see and be seen concept, all of those rules have shifted. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm super curious to how that manifests. And especially when I think about women in the workplace and minorities in the workplace, we already have seen the data of the income disparity of not being seen. Because you think about the places as women we are not in a lot of cases, it's because we're not being seen that I think a lot of the disparity on pay and opportunity and all of those things start to happen. And so now, how is that exacerbated when, if you are a parent, you are also trying to manage your kids and they're homeschooling because kids aren't going to go back to school? Or if you are now living in a completely remote organization, how are you making sure you are getting invited to meetings? How are you making sure all of those happens? So really looking at all of the rules of the office that you used to play by, I think every single one of them is up for grabs. Carrying on my little photo montage here, because we are now all consistently in experimental mode, and you guys have heard me, if you've been to these shows at all, this whole perfect, it's about what you've done. It's about accomplishing things. We are still going to look at productivity, but it is not the only measure of success. And so are you thinking about what are your actual KPIs for your role and for whatever it is you're doing in the organization? And then last but not least, one of the other rules that I am questioning and asking everybody is this rule of everything needs to be up and to the right. You know, nothing is ever just up and to the right. And I actually think this idea of everything should be that direction is part of what makes us feel extra stress, makes us feel like we've not actually done anything, starts to put us in a space where we are comparing ourselves to each other. And it generally, like if it's only this way, then you never will actually climb the mountain, and that's a little bit depressing. And we all know that once you've actually hit the peak of something, you're actually like, wait a second, is this all there is? I have a new idea that I'd love to share with you, and I actually want to hear some feedback about it, which we're going to get to in a second, around what is in this new world the thing that we should be optimizing for. And in my head, as I started to think about like, what is the goal for everybody in their future? And your goals, if you're just talking professionally, are twofold. At least I think there's two really key ones. One of them is the goal of, is my experience and value that I bring to the table not only recognized by other people, but am I bringing it confidently to the table? Along with, is my curiosity and excitement about what it is I'm going to do, the future of my work, something that is on the table too. So if you're looking, it's almost like you're creating a little set of house of cards that you're building for yourself. So there's confidence in your experience and your abilities, and this curiosity and excitement for the future. And if you think about when you have those two things perfectly balanced, your career moves from just a job to much more of feeling a bit like an adventure. Because with the confidence around what it is you're doing and how your thinking is contributing to the conversation, you can step into it with confidence and you can share ideas. It also then allows you to move into this space of curiosity and risk and experimentation, which, if you think about what is the true value of human thought and why people are such an important part of an organization, that's really where interesting things start to happen. Now I sit here and I go, imagine everybody came in with not only confidence themselves, but curiosity in the future, but also understood who everybody else's confidence and curiosity was within an organization. Well, that's when things really start to hum and sing and get really interesting. And so instead of saying that life should be a big up and to the right, I am questioning that if we shouldn't be building almost little baby mountains for ourselves, and mountains that have equal amounts of who we are and who we could be within that area. So rules that need to be thrown out and new rules that need to be thought about within this. So you're like, okay, so that's nice. Super agree with you. I hope you will agree with me about how basically the rule book is a big giant dumpster fire. So what do you do about it? How do you start thinking about the future you? And I say this because, and my guess is many of you have been through this before. I have been through professional dumpster fires before because I've found myself without a job, because the rules of engagement around the environment I was in completely shifted because there was a leadership change. I think about the dot-com crash of the 2000s was a bit of a dumpster fire on the rules. And while it is terrifying and a bit ambiguous and slightly stressful, I've now learned to lean into these situations and go, you know what, this is actually where growth comes from. I've been known for saying that it's when you're lying on the floor crying so hard that stuff is coming out of your nose that the interesting things start to happen. Because it is at those moments of the lowest of the low that you kind of can get up and go, okay, what can we do now? And that's really the conversation I want to have with you now is, okay, so shit just got real, shit just changed, things are getting a little bit crazy. So if you're on this call, I'm guessing that you are choosing to get up off the floor and do something different with your life and have impact. So how do you start thinking about that? My first step is, as you know, my favorite step, which is asking yourself, what ingredients do you have to work with? It's a little bit like, and no, this is not my refrigerator, because that would be awesome. There's a whole bunch of stuff other than the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi. I wouldn't have that, but all the other stuff I would. Lots of olives. But you know, you think about what we've all done recently with the fact that we've all been sheltering in place. We've all stood in front of our refrigerator door and gone, oh my God, what am I going to cook for dinner? So FYI, insider for you, if you ever come to my house, if it's me standing in front of the refrigerator door saying, what are we going to cook for dinner? I would probably have olives and I probably eat the olives for dinner. I am not a good cook and I'm not very good at putting products together. Olives and strawberries for dessert. We would be having a weird dinner. Lucky for me, I have an awesome husband who could probably whip up all sorts of magic things out of these ingredients. And I don't know how he does it, but he is really good at putting ingredients together. I am really good at putting professional ingredients together. But it's actually thinking about what are your ingredients. So let's do that exercise real quick. Hang on a second. Who would like to volunteer? All right, Stephanie, I know we missed you last time, so we're going to get you this time. Nice to see you back.
Hi.
Hi. Okay, so as you are thinking, so when I say to you, what are your ingredients? When you think about yourself professionally, we're going to go through the exercise. So what do you think the ingredients you have that you bring to the, what's in your personal refrigerator, so to speak? Not literally, but your professional one.
I'm thoughtful. I'm upbeat.
Hang on, you're a what?
I'm upbeat or optimistic.
Oh, upbeat. Okay.
Wow, this is hard when you put yourself on the spot, even though I've had a lot of time to think about this. I'm like, what are my sparkling adjectives?
Well, so let me back up a second, because and this is for everybody, as you're thinking about this for yourself, this is how you can ask yourself. So thoughtful and upbeat is lovely. I would absolutely love to invite you to like my vacation or my birthday parties and stuff like this. I certainly would want that in somebody when I have decided to hire you. But I'm not sure they'd be leading ingredients, although I think we can weave them in. So take a second, like, well, so you know my favorite question. So in normal people terms, you don't have to use the Joanna methodology. What is it you do?
Well, I'm unemployed currently. I was laid off as part of the Fox Disney acquisition.
Excellent. Yeah. Not excellent, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Gives you a background.
So what did you do at Fox? What was your job?
A director of the ad technology team. We, at the very high level, you know, when you access like Fox content online through FX networks or Hulu or whatever the case may be, and then you see ads inserted in the content, that was us, DAI. Dynamic.
Gotcha.
Yeah, at the very crux of it. But we did all sorts of things like measurement, like vetting technology, integration, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. So weird insider, I know exactly what a director of ad tech does and have hired many in my career. So we're good. Sorry, folks, I'm going to cheat a little bit because I have insider information. But as you're thinking, do you know what it is you want to do next? Do you want to stay in ad tech or do you want to do something different?
So I am a technical person, but my real strength is people, I would say. Like, I understand how to get buy-in. Like, I'm very good with the soft skills and the persuasion, and very good at translating technical concepts and projects to non-technical audiences and getting their buy-in, because that's usually the biggest obstacle. You know, when you get a mandate from above, but the people themselves are not technical and they're like, I don't know why you do use this. And we're like, that's not a good idea. This is what we would recommend you using. So I'm good in that capacity. And I'm better at leveraging the expertise of SMEs, subject matter experts, than doing the actual work themselves. But I would never ask anyone to do work that I have not done for myself. So I feel like I could do anything that I ask people to do. It would just take me much longer. But okay. I'm that. Like, I'll study it, you know, I'll figure it out.
So I want to refocus the question, because you gave me more information on what you're good at doing. What you didn't answer was, what is it you want to do? Do you have do you have an idea of what jobs you're going for or not?
I don't. I feel like because of my flexible nature, I don't have like a technical focus in any one place. I feel like I could fit into a bunch of things outside of technology or within other technologies. Yeah. a long time ago, I used to produce. So I actually started looking into that again, like working with like production companies that have like minority and women focused content. That I find that interesting to me, but I don't know. I don't know what I want to do ultimately.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple of pointers, and hopefully these are helpful for all of you as you're going through this. So one, this broadness of what it is you are sharing actually makes you really hard to buy. Mm-hmm. Because what you're in essence doing is making it really hard for somebody else to figure out how to fit you into their box, as opposed to showing them how you can provide value to them in the future. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like, I'm going to use a very girly situation. It's a bit like when you go shopping for a pair of black shoes. There's a gazillion of them. And you have to be able to narrow that down to a couple. It's the reason why we always feel a bit overwhelmed when you go into, let me think of a dramatic example. Look, whenever I go into a Ross Dress for Less, yes, I do. Or I Love Home Goods, actually, is my favorite. It's a lot, and you're having to make far too many decisions. Whereas if you go into a high-end boutique, they'll have like 3 blouses, right? And when you think about the whole decision process and somebody trying to understand how to buy you, you almost need to manage yourself like a luxury boutique. The more senior you are, the more important I think that becomes, because the price of you goes up over time, and ergo the value of you should go up. So as you were talking, what I was listening for is, how do we actually bucket your areas of expertise so that you can tell a bit of a story around what are your ingredients? And you've really got, like, if I was going to draw a Venn diagram of you, mm-hmm. You've got understanding and experience of the advertising industry. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a really broad one. I think this technical to non-technical skill is another one. And then the last is your previous experience around content production. So now if I said, like, what are your ingredients? Saying, like, I come to looking at opportunities with really 3 major categories of ingredients and value for an organization. One is a really deep, rich understanding of the advertising industry and how all of it works, from pricing all the way through to actually delivering ads to customers at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. With that also comes an understanding of how to build the content and stories around those, whether they're with advertising or not. So imagine a content producer. And then last but not least, both of those 2 roles have allowed me to really bridge roles that understand how to explain technical ideas to non-technical people. Mm. So when I think about all of those ingredients together, it's a role that might manifest a revenue strategy, a storytelling strategy, but ultimately a strategy that's probably powered by technology. And I can both lead teams and ideas through those processes. Do you see how we put them into nice, simple, understandable? How many of you guys would be like, I kind of get what Stephanie does now without knowing what yeah, lots of hands. How many of you know somebody who might need somebody like Stephanie, or know somebody who has a job? That's a bummer. I give it a shot. I gotta give it a shot. But it's actually bucketing those things together. And what you did in the early piece, I'm just going to give you something to chew on, is you followed the interview rules. And the interview rules were, tell me about the work that you want to do. You actually talked about the fact that you can leverage SMEs. Mm-hmm. I don't really care. I will want to know how you lead a team if I later want to talk to you about team leading. Mm-hmm. And or as you're talking about your areas of expertise, if you know it's a leadership role, I would probably say, I know we need to talk about my leadership style, we can talk about those as well, but this is how I think that I'm bringing to the table. When you talked about being thoughtful and upbeat and good with people, like how you present yourself will actually bring that up. But you think about like, what are people buying first? You really want to position how you think in those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. It's really, because we work in such a double-sided marketplace where the opportunity has to be right for you as much as you have to be right for it. I absolutely want people to understand and be bought for their personality as much as their capabilities. Mm-hmm. But when you're thinking about, like, think about the sales funnel of an ad. In that first piece, like, do you fit across that first section? And this, by the way, for any of you who've been through product design and the sales process, like, go do some reading on the sales process and how people buy products, because what they're in essence is buying you, and your first version of your product, like the first time you see a new product, there's enough information to get somebody intrigued so that they want to have more information for you, so that they want to have more, and it's actually taking people through that sales process and starting with, like, what is the thing that's going to say, I want to have more than a 60-second conversation with you, right? Mm-hmm. Because how many of you are hiring managers or have hired people in the past? Yeah, so Stephanie, you've hired people. Well, so in an interview, how long did it take you in the interview to decide whether you wanted to continue the conversation?
I would say within 5 minutes.
So you're being generous, because we had a bunch of people who were like, 2 minutes, right?
Well, usually pleasantries, and then afterwards.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've all seen the research around how, like, we make super fast decisions just based on this, right? And, you know, sadly, this is also important, because we do, and our brains work that way. We bucket things. But I sit here and I go, like, we all know this. So then I sit here and go, like, talking to somebody on a Zoom call or recruiter or whoever, like, what is the first thing that you want them to remember about you? And that's why I do this ingredients exercise and say, like, because we are all multidimensional and can do a lot of things. Like, you can do all of the things. I know, because you've been ad tech, that you probably have all sorts of ideas around supply chain optimization and how to respond to a product request for a product that doesn't exist. I would highly, by the way, if you haven't, were you on the ad tech call or ad operations call I actually had the other day?
No, but I was introduced to you through Rob Beeler's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the video from that particular show is actually up on our YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
If you search Joanna Bloor, yeah, because I actually really get into the weeds a bit on how, as an ad tech person, you can describe your value beyond just ad technology specifically. So just a little extra tip for you there. So think about, like, for everybody, like, think about, like, what are the buckets of stuff that you want to start with? Because your goal is just to get somebody to go, I want to have more than a 2-minute conversation with you. And it is as much about you as what they might be wanting to do. Again, that whole idea of the double-sided marketplace. Okay, moving on. So that's, what are the ingredients in your fridge? Whoops. The second thing, and I think this is equally important for everybody, is to actually sit down and say, well, what is important to you? And what I mean by what is important to you is really understanding what is it you want. And I use, as you can see, I have a big bucket of future you, but I use these 6 categories to really help you think about how to think about and prioritize what is important to you. So I'm going to go around them really quickly and explain what they are so you can start thinking about them. So first of all, there's the present you. So the present you is what's important for right now. Like, what are you doing? What do you want life to look like? What are your skills? All of the normal stuff that you were like, look, if I was going to get an easy, well, maybe not an easy, but if somebody was going to hire me, like, what does today look like? The next thing, and we're going to go counterclockwise around the circle. The next thing I always ask people to think about is, how are you prioritizing what is bigger than you? Because here's the thing, if we all did work that is just present you work, we'd all get super bored, because it's just doing stuff that we already know and we already know how to do, and we can kind of do it with one hand tied behind our back. Bigger than you is, where are you going to have impact? Where are you really driving to a vision? What is the thing when you sit here and say, gosh, I want something that is bigger than myself? Like, what are you talking about there? You'll also notice that I've put actual percentage values to these numbers. So it is more important in this current state, I made these numbers up, for me to be doing something that is bigger than me than something that is actually me at the end of the day, right? So then there's the third bucket, which is confident and curious you. So the confident and curious you is the person, you remember I talked about the two triangles. So if you've got confidence rule you've got lots of space for you to be able to do curious you. So if confident you is there, what is it in this role that you want to be known for? What are you bringing confidently to the table? This is beyond your ingredients, but like, do you have a vision? I think about, anytime I look at opportunity, I always go, oh, could I totally crush this? What does that look like? And how important is it for you to be confident in whatever your future opportunity? Then there's my giant bucket of the future you. So where am I going to get to experiment? Where am I going to get to be curious? Where am I going to learn something new? Where am I going to get to color outside the lines? Super important to me, maybe not so much to other people. And then last but not least is this idea of the just for you. So you are more than just the work that you do. You are also maybe a parent and a friend and somebody who's really good at knitting, or somebody who likes to go hiking, or whatever it is, because you are a full, rich 360-degree person. And there might be some priorities in life that are just for you. So really great example of this is whenever I look at opportunities, although now I'm remote and I run my own company, so it doesn't matter as much. But when it comes to where I live, I have to live within 2 hours of a marina that has access to the ocean. Because if those of you that don't know, my husband is an adventure sailor and writer and goes to sea for really long times and does all sorts of crazy things out there. If you don't know who he is and want to find that out, just search for Randall Reeves on the Googles and you will see what I am talking about. And so I have a slightly weird limitation in my life. Now, I used to have in my Just For You bucket that I also needed to live within an hour of a major international airport because I was getting on the plane all the time. So we had not only international airport, but the marina geography thing that was unique to my situation. And so when I was looking at opportunities, this was actually a really big deal. I won't forget, when was this? 2008? I was interviewing for a job where the company was based out of New York City. And it was a really great opportunity for me. I was super excited because it really tapped into where I was confident. It was really going to really support the present me and kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs items that I had for the present me. I was going to be working on something bigger than myself, and there was a huge opportunity to do something massive in the future. However, in the Just For You was the really big issue of, would they make me move to New York City? I'll tell you, we went through the entire negotiation process And in the final stages, because we had salary and all of the goodies and the title and what was I going to do, and I'd met everybody, all of it was all good. And I said to them, I said in the offer letter, because we had talked about not making me relocate and that I could work remotely out of the Bay Area, and I could commute to New York, and I was more than willing to do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, I would like to get that in writing in my offer letter, that that's an agreement that we have, that you are not going to make me move to New York. And I got an enormous amount of pushback. And so I pushed back again, and I said, I don't know what the problem is. You guys verbally agreed to it. It's a bit like a prenup. Why don't you just put it in writing? It'll just make me feel more confident. I said, because quite frankly, I'm taking a risk by moving to this opportunity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I found out through the HR team that they, decision maker actually had no intention of letting me stay in San Francisco, was going to give me the job, let me commute for 6 months, and then require me to move to New York City, which at that point I wouldn't have had much choice. And so I walked away from the opportunity. It was awful. I would not recommend it to anybody, but you have to really understand all of the elements that are you. So again, present you. Who are you? What are the Maslow's hierarchy of needs? What do you need for present you to be good? Bigger than you, how do you want to have impact, or like what is the area that really allows you to be beyond yourself? Confident you, like really how can they leverage what is amazing about you and that you are confident in? Future you, how can you experiment? What can you do in the future? And then just for you are the things that are just personal to you. Because for everybody who goes through these experiences with us or is thinking about this, this is your career adventure. This is not a one size fit all. There is no rule book in all of this. These numbers are your own. And so looking at these different categories and saying like, what ultimately at the end of the day is most important to me is a really important thing. Okay. So now you've got your ingredients and you've got your percentages of what's important to you. How do you then, which is I know why you all showed up today, start to make some decisions? Welcome to one of my favorite toys that I use. This is my Future You decision-making slating document. I will absolutely own that this was ideated from something that I used to have to do when I was at CBS Interactive and had to explain to the HR organization why I was hiring one employee over another. We had a whole matrix to make sure that there wasn't bias in our hiring process. And in that, and I'll explain what it used to look like, we had to write down like, what are all of the hard skills that we needed from a candidate? And then what were all the soft skills we needed from a candidate? And we'd put them all on there, we'd give them a weighting factor. And then as each candidate came through, we would have to then score them against the various different matrices. You'd then multiply the weighting by the score, math, 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 you'd find out who was the person you should be hiring based on real data. Now, I'm going to caveat this with yes, absolutely. Could you game the math? All day. But we had to do that. So this is what we would do. Roll backwards again to 2009, 2010. I was coming to the end of what I thought was my tenure at CBS. I was in a challenging situation because I had two bosses at the time. And I don't think they liked each other very much and quite frequently used me as a bit of a pawn in the middle. And I was like, this is not good. And I might end up being collateral damage in this scenario unless I figure out how to have one boss and one vision and one future, because yeah, FYI, two bosses rarely a good idea unless your bosses are super aligned, which is not usually the case. And so I started looking for other opportunities. And I'll tell you, I had the job I had at CBS, And then I had 3 other opportunities that I was looking at and in the process of interviewing for. One was with a fairly stable company that had just gone public. They had a really groovy office down in South San Francisco, and it had like pink walls and was super fun. And there was a lot of toys and exciting stuff. The second opportunity, I was going to be employee number 9. Was actually going to open up the San Francisco office. They didn't have one. And it was in data, which was a whole new area for me. And I had the biggest professional crush on the CEO. Then I still have a giant professional crush. She's an amazing person. And I wanted to work for her so badly because I was like, I can learn so much from this woman. She's amazing. And then the third opportunity was working for a company who was Series A, who may or may not have a growth spurt, who some of the executives I was super excited to work with because of a whole bunch of personal reasons. And some of the executives I was like, not so much. And when you think about that whole future job situation, when you're looking at opportunities, my guess is many of you, when you're looking at different opportunities, are like, oh God, yes, I've had different choices that I've had to make in my future about different things that I can do. And it's really hard to compare because it's not an apples to apples. What we often end up doing is just looking at things like title and compensation. And the reality is that decision is actually way more complex. And what we're trying to do in these scenarios is both make a strategic decision for ourselves, think about all of the emotions that are wound up in this. We've talked about how I had a crush on one of the people. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But it is an emotional decision, and be able to predict the future when you don't know what the future is. So I created this to help you use math to help you make an emotional decision. So let me just do a stop share for a second, just so I can see all your faces for a sec. Who would like to play with a little bit on the future you decision matrix? Bless you. All right, Trish, game on. You're gonna have to unmute yourself so I can hear you.
There. Got
Awesome.
me?
Yes, and let me just pop you back on my screen. Okay, so first question for you. Do you have any opportunities on the horizon that you're considering? Do we actually have a real use case we're working for? Do we have ideas?
I have two opportunities.
Awesome. So we're going to go through this. Okay, so step 1 in this, and we're going to do a sort of fast version of this just so folks can go. So thinking about this future you, present you, bigger than you, confident you, just for you. Let's actually start with the present you criteria. So what are, and feel free if you want to be secret about some of the answers to make answers up, but like, what are the life elements? What are the Maslow's hierarchy of needs elements that need to be in place for you to go, look, if these are sorted out, life is good.
They both have the right salary and benefit package.
No, I don't want to talk about the opportunities yet. I want to talk about, like, let's do a fantasy, like what is, not fantasy as in fairy godmother fantasy, but like for any opportunity, what are the up to 5 things that you're like, these need to just be there?
I want to work with a team that I feel vitalized by. That's nebulous, but I like to be around people who are bringing great ideas to the table. They might be really wacky, but they are working to find new ways, divergent ways of doing business and improving processes.
Okay, what else?
So, I like travel, or I used to like travel, let's say. So that was always a high point.
Would you say that's a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like this has to be there, or is this a just for you criteria?
if given two jobs, between the two jobs, one's travel and one is not, I'll go
No,
for the
so
travel.
we're not in comparative yet. We're just talking about what are the criteria. And so
I
I'm
guess it
saying,
would
is
be a
this
just for me, a just
okay.
for me. One thing that
Includes,
does have to be is leadership.
okay.
That's one of the things that has to be.
Do you have, now I know that, is there a title level that you won't go below?
No, well, a title level that I won't go below, probably director.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on from there. So again, this is just your criteria. So as you're thinking about this, so what is the future you learn? Like, what do you want to learn in your next opportunity?
Oh, what do I want to learn in my next opportunity? Gosh, I would like to learn how to really use data more efficiently.
Okay, anything else?
That's the big one.
That's the big one. Okay. Is there any, and there are no wrong answers here. Is there any bigger than you criteria that we should add to this?
I'm sorry, say one more time.
Is there any bigger than you criteria we should add? Like, is having impact
I would love
in any way?
something green, something that would promote green.
Okay. And when we talked about, so confident you don't have to put compensation on here, but like, what do you think are your, coming back to your ingredients, what are the core ingredients that you're like, I want to be able to bring this part of me to the table because it's awesome?
Leadership. I'm a very strong leader. I can inspire people to do more than what they expected they could do.
Okay. Can you give me a couple of other ones?
Let's see. One of the things. Nebulous, it would be gratitude. And it's typically gratitude, appreciation.
Okay.
And I like to develop programs.
Okay. I do not, only because I know you a little bit, nothing about your innate sales ability.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can close the right opportunity. In other words, if we've got the right prospect and the right solution, we can get that closed.
Okay. This is a good start. I would flesh this out some more as you go through it. And I know we're doing it on the fly, but so step one is like, what are all of the things that are unique to you? Step two is you actually put a weighting factor against these. So if all of these are important. One is, it would be a nice to have, but it's not a super important. And 10 is if it doesn't include this. And I'm actually going to I'm going to put this in there. We won't put the math is. 10 is, oh my God, if it's not there, I will lose my mind. You are not allowed to use 6 because I think 6 is a cop-out number when it comes to weighting things. So.
Okay, so is it 1 to 10 for each one of these, or is
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So for understanding data, how important is that to you? Give me a number.
I would say a 7.
Okay. Team that vitalizes?
9.
Divergent business?
Can that be the same value as the 9?
Okay, absolutely.
All right.
Leadership
10.
role? Okay. Compensation?
9.
Okay. Something green?
That would be an 8. It would be nice, but it's not a gotta have.
Okay. Leadership, I think we are 10 on this one.
10.
What about gratitude, appreciation?
I have to be able to show my gratitude and appreciation to my team. I don't care so much about it from coming from above, but I've got to be able to have the mechanisms to do it for my team. So I would say 9.
Okay.
So I'll find a way.
Ability to develop new programs?
That's a 9.
Okay. And closing You can be a
10,
deal.
that would have to be a
Okay.
10.
And then last but not least, travel.
At this day and age, it would have to be a 5.
Okay. All right. So now we have the core pieces in here. You do not have to give me the details. So now I want you to, you're going to have to guess. This is the hard part because you don't know for sure. But on a 1 to 100, 100 being it's going to knock this one out the park, 1 being, oh, not even close, and everything in between. How would you score opportunity A in understanding data? And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and hide that column. Oops.
Okay. So
You shouldn't
for
be looking at
opportunity A, for understanding data, that one is 100%. For opportunity B, it's more like 40%.
Okay. Now let's go down to vitalizing team.
I would say that's about a 90% for the first one and 100% for the second one.
Okay.
Divergent
business.
business. I would say it's 90% on one, on the first one, and 80% on the other.
Okay.
The leadership, it's 100 on both sides.
That's awesome.
Compensation, I would say it's 100 on both sides. They're pretty even.
Okay.
Something
And
green,
then,
I would say that's, I'm going to have to go with 60. I know you hate the number 60, but it is 60 on that one.
I know you said in the weighting factor you couldn't use 6, but go ahead.
Okay, and then on the opportunity B, I would say it's a 40.
Okay.
And then, let's see, 100. On gratitude, I don't really know, so I would go down with 40 and 40 on both of them because I just don't know.
Okay.
Develop new programs, I would say probably 80 and 100. And then closing deals, it'll be 100 and 100 because that's what I'll have to be doing.
And then what about travel for both of them?
It's nebulous right now, so I would just say 50-50.
Okay. Okay. Opportunity A.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's
is
interesting.
winning by a smidge.
Yeah. And so it's interesting how each one of these, if I tweak it later on, because I'll get more information later on, how that will impact how much I will be happy, excited to challenge, confident.
Exactly. And I'm going to use a really simple one as an example. So something green is such an interesting one there. Like imagine you had this as a weighting factor 2. It really starts to change the numbers a little bit.
Definitely.
And when you think about, like, I also sit here and say, you're obviously in the world of sales. For many people on this call, there could be stock options. And for any of you who have looked at stock options as part of your compensation package, boy, is that a whole conversation for a different day. I should get somebody who's an expert in to talk about all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's a hard consideration. That's a real hard consideration.
A pro tip for everybody. So, and here, I'm going to stop sharing this because I think you guys can all see, like, pro tip on stock options. I'm just going to say, I am not a financial expert. I am not giving financial advice, caveat, right? If they are offering you stock options, the 2 questions you should ask is 1, how many outstanding shares are there? And then 2, what is the current strike price? And the current strike price is what they are going to price your options at. And with the combination of those, you should get a decent idea of what the valuation, it's not going to be 100% accurate because there's been rounds, vague idea of what the company is going to be worth, how many outstanding shares there are. And like, I use and this is really fuzzy math. I divide it all by 10 because that's going to, if you say, okay, if we're going to go public at $10-ish, or if there's an exit at $10, it's usually somewhere around there, then how big is the delta? And is that actually possible? So as a really good example, I worked for one of the startups I worked for, actually all I have a very weird, every public company I have worked for has either been acquired or gone public, which has been awesome. I am also the poster child that that is not the path to richness at all levels. Founders and investors, well, investors for sure, founders sometimes, but for regular people, not so much. It certainly helped me in my career, but yeah, it took me a while of those. But one of them, the mathematics on the number of shares outstanding and what they needed to sell for was so off that we had a 10-to-1, it may have even been a 20-to-1 reverse stock split. Ooh. Which basically meant for every 20 shares I had, they actually mathed it backwards and said, well, now you have one, which there's this amazing conversation about how it's the same price because it's the same value that everyone will have you, but basically your valuation just dropped. And so if you're trying to figure out what your stock options are actually worth, those are really good questions to ask. And I think, Kylie, let's make a note that well, just as a poll, like how many of you give a hoot about whether if somebody coming in and actually talking about how to think about compensation and stock options would be helpful? All right, about 50. Oh, yep, a bunch of you. Okay, so we might do that in the future. Something to think about for sure. But you saw how Trish used that to really help make decisions. And I'll tell you, I know when I went through the exercise, I went, oh, that's a surprise, because we do have such emotion tied up in various different things. And it's not only emotion of ourselves, but it's the emotion of what are the expectations of other people. Because when you take a job, you have to explain to people why you're taking one over the other. Plus there is, of course, the really hard conversation you have to say with somebody where you say, I'm really sorry, we're not going to date. And you have to manage that whole process, but it does help you make that decision. If you are in a situation where you currently have a job and you are trying to decide whether you want to do something else, or you don't have a job and you're like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. As you are doing your research, you can still guess. And what I actually recommend people do if you are considering leaving your current role or you're questioning something is actually your option A should be your current opportunity. Mm-hmm. Because whatever the new opportunities should be, they should beat them handily. And if they don't, you should actually take another look at, have you actually got a bird in the hand? And, you should reconsider that. Really look at, is the opportunity that you're at right now the one for you? And is the ones out there just you're appealing to because they're the shiny new toy? But you can absolutely, like, say, for instance, you want to really pivot your career, score on the criteria that is important to you about what do you think the role is going to look like. And the more honest you are with yourself in that scoring process, the easier it is for you to be able to make what are really tough emotional decisions as you move forward. So those are my pro tips. It's a really simple spreadsheet. You guys all should know how to make them yourself. That said, I am going to share, as you've seen in a lot of announcements, we are shifting these live from Joanna shows to ticketed shows that we now do 3 of the 4 events every month. And with the ticket, we are now including any tools or toolkits that we create, and we're actually upping the ante on all of them, will be part of your ticket price. So in this scenario, you would have all actually gotten the spreadsheet and then how to create the graph and all of that good sort of stuff that'll be included in your ticket price. What we're also doing, because we are busy creating products behind the scenes for you as well, is that if you purchase a ticket to one of these events, your ticket price actually gets credited towards any of the products. So as an example, if you're like, oh my God, one-on-ones, Joanna, are super expensive, I can't afford this, buy tickets to shows, you will get tons of value. You also know that I do lots of demos on them. You will learn more stuff, and all of those ticket prices will actually get credited towards either time with me or any of the other products that we have on joannabloor.com. So it's an investment at $10 in you as you move forward. We still are going to have once a month, the Why Do You Need to Talk About the Future You presentation. You are always welcome, but if you are a regular, we're probably going to cancel your Eventbrite ticket because those shows specifically are created for people who have not been through the Joanna transformation experience, because they will be the same presentation every month. Last thing on the ticketed shows, the $10 shows, they're actually technically $9.95. We will also be giving away a free hour one-on-one value experience with me personally, which is the whole shebang. It's a $750 value to one person on every single one of these calls. So if you want to win a thing, that is the way to come to these as well. We've got a ton more stuff in the pipeline that we're going to be talking about and sharing, all sorts of things around confidence and texting and all of that good sort of stuff. So if you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, I highly recommend doing so, because that's where we make a lot of announcements, and or follow me on either LinkedIn or Twitter, because we do those there too. So, whoo, I just got in under the wire. Any other questions before I let you all go? Awesome. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming. Invite friends, because we want everybody to be awesome. You guys have an awesome weekend, an awesome Friday, and stay safe. Ultimately, we're here to help you figure out how to teach other people who the future you is, so that you can be you in the future. Because the clearer you are about who you are, what you want, and teach other people why that's awesome, the more likely you get to be you. I know, it's a bit of a circle. I'm Joanna, your potentialist and fairy godmother, and I wish you the very best. Thanks for coming.